Some cases leave your docket. Others, they follow you home. They hide in the echo of a siren at midnight, in the pause between heartbeats, in the way your hand still tightens when you remember a voice that believed it was untouchable. This is one of those cases. Not because of blood, not because of violence, but because of a sentence spoken so casually. It cracked something fundamental inside the idea of justice. She said it without fear, without shame. Laws are for poor people. And in that moment, the courtroom hadn't even existed yet, but the damage was already done. Tuesday morning, December 12th. Providence woke under a sky the color of unfinished judgment, cold, gray, indifferent. I walked into my courtroom knowing something was different. You can feel it when the air itself resists you, when the walls listen harder than usual. This wasn't just another defendant. This was a mirror held up to power itself, because the woman about to stand before me was the daughter of someone who had built her life on the promise that no one is above the law. Her name was Madison Chen, 24 years old, and she believed the law belonged to her family. The charges read like a checklist of arrogance finally colliding with reality. Assault on a police officer, resisting arrest, destruction of public property, public intoxication, threatening a federal official, obstruction of justice. But the charges weren't the story. The belief was. She believed her bloodline was armor. She believed a badge could be inherited. She believed justice had tears. And worst of all, she believed it out loud. 2 weeks earlier, Providence had gathered to honor sacrifice. Veterans Day. 30,000 people lined Federal Hill, flags waving, children on shoulders, old men standing taller than their bones allowed, because memory demanded it. Men and women who had bled quietly for principles most people only quote when it's convenient. And into that sacred morning walked Madison Chen, drunk, angry, and freshly expelled from Georgetown Law School. Not for misunderstanding the law, for disrespecting it. She had spent the morning moving from bar to bar, as if collecting witnesses for her own undoing. At Murphy's Tavern, she arrived already unsteady, demanding top-shelf whiskey like entitlement was legal tender. When asked for ID, she flashed a federal credential, not hers, and claimed checking her was illegal. At the Federal Hill Social Club, she mocked military service, called it a refuge for the unintelligent, and threatened veterans with investigations as if courage were a crime. By the time she reached Antonio's wine bar, she was drinking prestige by the bottle and threatening livelihoods by the sentence. My mother could shut you down with one call. Power spoken like profanity. Then she drove, straight into barricades meant to protect lives. She leaned on her horn like authority had a sound. That's when Officer David Martinez approached, 12-year veteran, 2 tours in Iraq, the kind of man who knew restraint not as policy, but as survival. "Ma'am, the roads are closed for the parade." A simple sentence, a reasonable boundary. Her response revealed everything. "I'm Madison Chen. My mother runs the FBI. These closures don't apply to me." That wasn't defiance. That was doctrine. Officer Martinez did what professionals do. He explained. He offered alternatives. She exited her vehicle instead, left it blocking traffic like rules were optional suggestions, and for 15 minutes, in the middle of a street-honoring service, she preached entitlement like gospel. Her voice carried. Phones rose. History began recording. She didn't look like most defendants. Perfect posture, educated cadence, confidence sharpened by immunity. But privilege isn't loud because it's strong. It's loud because it's fragile. "Laws are for poor people," she said, as if explaining gravity to a child. "Families like mine decide when they apply." The crowd changed. Parents tightened grips. Veterans stiffened spines. Because something sacred was being violated, not a rule, but a promise. Then she walked toward the veterans. Men in their 70s, 80s, 90s, some standing, some sitting, all present. She pointed at them. "These old men fought for a country that doesn't exist anymore." Her words fell like ash. "America belongs to families like mine now." 97-year-old Robert Santos sat in his wheelchair, decorations pinned with trembling dignity. She told him to move, said the area was for important families. When he explained who he was, what he had done, she dismissed it. "I don't care what you did 60 years ago. My mother runs the FBI today." Power doesn't tremble when it speaks like that. It sneers. His grandson stepped forward, a Marine, recently home, still carrying war in his posture. "Show some respect." She turned on him like authority owed her obedience. "My mother outranks everyone you answer to. Move him, or face consequences." That's when the crowd broke, not into violence, into clarity. This wasn't about traffic. This was about whether democracy meant anything when someone decided it didn't apply to them. Officer Martinez stepped in again, calm, measured, final. "Return to your vehicle," she laughed. "You're interfering with a federal family." Then she said it again, the sentence that would follow her forever. "Wars are for poor people, not for families like mine." When he moved to arrest her, she spat in his face. Spit. The oldest expression of contempt. "You can't arrest FBI family. This is treason." It took 4 officers to restrain her. She kicked, she bit, she screamed threats into the future. "My mother will destroy you." And as the cuffs closed, something invisible shattered. The video went viral. Millions watched entitlement collapse under reality. But the most powerful image wasn't her rage. It was the veterans, standing silently, unmoved in dignity. 24 hours later, her mother stood at a podium, an FBI director, a woman who had spent decades enforcing the idea that no one stands above the law. Her face was older, her voice steady. "My daughter does not represent us, and she will face the consequences. No shield, no interference. Justice, unmoved by blood." 2 weeks later, Madison Chen stood in my courtroom. And for the first time in her life, power was not listening to her, it was judging her. Courtrooms have a sound, not the shuffle of shoes, not the coughs, not the gavel. It's the sound of expectation, the moment when power walks in and waits to see who stands up first. That morning, power arrived dressed in navy blue. Madison Chen entered at exactly 10 a.m., not a second early, not a second late. Precision was her last illusion of control. She wore humility like a costume, simple dress, hair pulled back, no jewelry loud enough to offend the narrative. But eyes don't lie. Her eyes still carried certainty, the kind that says this will end the way I expect. Behind her sat friends of the family, people who had never been told no by a system they believed existed to serve them. One seat was empty, her mother's. That absence spoke louder than any testimony ever could. The clerk read the case. State of Rhode Island versus Madison Catherine Chen. Each charge landed like a bell tolling. Not dramatic, not theatrical, final. Her attorney stood immediately. Tailored suit, controlled confidence. A man who had convinced many rooms that consequences were negotiable. "Not guilty, Your Honor." The words echoed. They always do. He spoke of stress, of pressure, of expectations placed on children of greatness. He said the words out of character like character was something that slipped instead of something revealed. I listened. Judges always do. Then I asked the question that matters. "Mr. Harrison, how does stress explain spitting on a police officer and telling veterans the law doesn't apply to her?" Silence stretched. That's when truth usually starts sweating. Madison stood, slow, calculated. The courtroom leaned forward without realizing it. "Not guilty, Your Honor," she said again. "This incident has been misrepresented by people who don't understand federal protocols." There it was, the doctrine. I leaned in. "Miss Chen, you were recorded, you were heard. What part of spitting on an officer was misunderstood?" Her confidence flickered, just once. "I was having a panic attack," she said. because officers were blocking me from areas where I had legitimate federal family clearance. Federal family clearance. A phrase that doesn't exist, but has protected many lies. What clearance allows you to drive through? A Veterans Day parade? Her lips pressed together. She searched her memory for a rule that had always bent before. FBI families have courtesy access. Courtesy. Another word that dissolves under scrutiny. That's when I called the first witness, Officer David Martinez. He walked to the stand the same way he'd walked toward her car that day. Calm, prepared, unafraid of noise. 12 years on the force. 2 wars survived. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He described barricades, safety, protocol, then her name, her claim, her certainty. She said road closures didn't apply to her, he testified. She said her mother ran the FBI. Madison stared straight ahead, still believing composure was protection. And when you offered assistance? I asked. She got out of her car, he said, left it blocking traffic, started telling people laws were for poor people. The room reacted, not loudly, but deeply, like something sacred had been stepped on again. He spoke of the veterans, of Robert Santos, of the words no one wanted to hear spoken out loud. She said her family mattered more than what he did in the war. Madison shifted, just slightly. Enough. I turned to her. Did you say that, Miss Chen? Her attorney moved to object. She stopped him. That confidence again. I may have spoken inappropriately, she said, but context matters. Context. The refuge of the unrepentant. What context makes that appropriate? She swallowed. I was under extreme distress. I had a federal obligation. What obligation required you to drive through a parade honoring the fallen? Her answer came slower this time. Security arrangements, she said, not all of which I'm authorized to discuss. The lie hovered, thin, transparent. Officer Martinez continued. He described the arrest, the spit, the kick, the bite, the threats. My mother will destroy you. Each sentence stripped another layer away, not from her, from the belief that power always wins. I looked at Madison again. Did you spit on Officer Martinez? I defended myself, she said. I was being illegally detained. Illegally, I repeated. Yes, FBI families have immunity protections. There it was, the delusion spoken plainly. Miss Chen, I said, there's no such thing as federal family immunity. She smiled. Not kindly, not nervously, confidently. That's not how the system works in practice. And in that moment, the courtroom wasn't hearing a defendant. It was hearing a worldview. She believed the quiet part was safe to say. That truth was whatever power enforced, that justice was theater for people without leverage. And she wasn't done yet. Everyone knows, she continued, wealthy families get different treatment, government families especially. She paused, then delivered the line again. Cleaner this time, sharper. Laws are for poor people because they can't fight back. The room went still, not shocked, resolved, because now the choice was clear. Either the court bowed, or the illusion died here. And for the first time in her life, Madison Chen was about to learn what it feels like when the system does not flinch. Contempt isn't loud at first. It doesn't scream. It doesn't throw chairs. Contempt begins as certainty, the belief that consequences are for other people. And Madison Chen had never met a consequence that didn't blink first. When she said it again, laws are for poor people because they can't fight back. Something irreversible happened in that room. Not outrage, clarity, the kind that settles like a verdict long before one is spoken. I looked at her, not as a symbol, not as a daughter of power, but as a defendant standing where equality either lives or dies. "Miss Chen," I said, "do you understand where you are?" She tilted her head, as if the question itself were naive. "I'm in municipal court," she replied, "but this case doesn't belong here." There it was, the rejection of jurisdiction, the refusal to be ordinary. "You believe this court lacks authority over you?" She didn't hesitate. "Yes, my family operates under federal oversight. Local courts don't understand that." The room inhaled. This wasn't ignorance. This was doctrine spoken with conviction. I called for the victim impact statement. Officer Martinez's words were simple. They didn't beg. They didn't accuse. They testified. "In 12 years of service and 2 tours in Iraq, I've been threatened, cursed, and shot at. But I've never had someone tell me they were above the law because of their parents' job." His voice didn't break. That's what made it unbearable. He spoke of dignity, of trust, of how law enforcement only works when the public believes no one is immune. "When someone claims their family is above the law," he wrote, "they don't just insult an officer. They weaken democracy." I looked up. "Miss Chen," I asked, "what's your response?" She sighed. A sound of inconvenience. "I'm sorry he felt upset," she said, "but he misunderstood federal protocols." Misunderstood. The word people use when they refuse to accept reality. "You spat on him," I said. "That was defensive. You kicked him. I was resisting an illegal arrest. You bit him. I panicked." Every answer folded back into one belief. I am exempt. Then she said it, not angrily, not defensively, honestly. "You don't understand what it's like being my mother's daughter." That sentence carried more weight than anything she'd said before. "Every police officer in this country knows who I am," she continued. "They know my mother controls investigations, funding, careers." The room stiffened. This wasn't arrogance anymore. It was an accusation against the system itself. "Miss Chen," I said, "your mother does not control local police." She smiled, the kind of smile built on proximity to power. "The FBI investigates corruption," she replied. "Everyone knows families like mine deserve courtesy." Courtesy. The word sounded different now, heavier, more dangerous. "Courtesy does not mean immunity," I said. She leaned forward. "But why not?" There it was, the question that reveals belief. "My family sacrifices everything," she said. "Security, privacy, safety. Why should we follow the same rules as people who contribute nothing?" The courtroom absorbed that sentence like a bruise. "Because," I said slowly, "that's what separates democracy from tyranny." She laughed, not cruelly, confidently. "That's idealism, Your Honor. Everyone knows the system works differently for people like us." Then she delivered the line that ended any remaining illusion. I was just honest about it. That's when I stood. Judges don't stand often. But when they do, it means something has crossed a line that cannot be negotiated back. "Miss Chen," I said, "you are in contempt of court." She didn't sit. She didn't flinch. She smiled. "I'm telling the truth." Truth. Another word abused by power. "Sit down," I ordered. "I don't take orders from municipal judges." Gasps. Not loud, sharp, the kind that cut. "Bailiff," I said, "take her into custody." She stepped back. "You can't arrest me. This is federal interference." As officers moved forward, she raised her voice. "My mother will shut this place down." That belief that family could erase accountability refused to die quietly. "Miss Chen," I said, "your mother swore to uphold the Constitution." She laughed again. Equal justice is a lie. Rich people get better everything. Then the final sentence, the one that sealed her fate. Why not better justice too? As the cuffs closed, she screamed, "This country belongs to families like mine. We make the rules." I watched her being led away. Not angry, not satisfied, resolved. Because justice had just done something rare. It had refused to blink. The courtroom stayed silent long after she was gone. Not because people were stunned, but because something had been corrected. And Madison Chen was about to learn that the loudest sound contempt ever makes is the moment it collapses into reality. Rucker, sentencing days don't feel like trials. There's no guessing left. No performance, only gravity. Madison Chen returned to the courtroom 3 days later. No makeup. No tailored confidence. Just a pale face and eyes that had learned something new. That time does not negotiate. She had spent 72 hours in holding. Not the kind of place power prepares you for. No private phone calls, no whispered favors, just metal benches, fluorescent lights, and the sound of other people's consequences. She looked smaller, not physically, spiritually. Her attorney stood again. Different posture now, less certainty, more apology. "Your Honor," he said, "my client wishes to express remorse." The word landed poorly. Remorse requires understanding. Madison stood, hands shaking just enough to be visible. "I apologize," she began, "for how my words were taken. Still not owned." "I was under immense stress," she continued. "I've lived my entire life under scrutiny because of my mother's position." She paused, searched the room for sympathy that used to arrive automatically. It didn't. "I didn't mean to insult anyone," she said. "I respect veterans. I respect law enforcement. Respect spoken after arrest is often just fear-wearing manners." Waited. Judges always do. Because truth either arrives on its own, or it never comes. "Miss Chen," I said, "do you believe you are above the law?" The question was simple, unavoidable. She hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. "No," she said finally. "I understand now." Understand. Another word that requires proof. "Then explain," I said, "why you claimed immunity and threatened officers with your mother's power." Her throat tightened. I believed my family had certain protections." Believed. The past tense arrived late. "And do you still believe that?" Silence stretched. This time it didn't save her. "No," she said, but her eyes didn't agree. The prosecution stood. Their voice carried no anger, just fact. They played the video. Again, not for drama, for memory. The words echoed. "Laws are for poor people. Families like mine make the rules. Wars are for people who don't matter." Each sentence struck harder the second time. Because now, she had nowhere to stand above them. The prosecutor finished. "This is not a case about privilege," they said. "This is a case about what happens when someone believes privilege replaces citizenship." I looked at Madison. She looked away. That was new. "Miss Chen," I said, "you had every advantage this country offers: education, security, opportunity. And you used those advantages to claim exemption from responsibility." I leaned forward. "That ends here." I spoke slowly, so every word would stay with her. "You assaulted a police officer." Pause. "You disrespected veterans." Pause. "You attempted to use your mother's position to intimidate public servants." Pause. "You showed no genuine remorse until power stopped answering your calls." Her breath hitched. Tears formed, too late to erase, just enough to feel. Privilege, I continued, is not a shield. It is a test. The courtroom stayed perfectly still, and you failed it. The sentence followed. Not dramatic, precise, 30 days incarceration, mandatory anger management, public apology to the Veterans Association, loss of deferred prosecution, permanent record. Her attorney flinched. She froze. 30 days. To someone like her, that was exile. No, she whispered. Just one word. But it carried the weight of a life that had never been told no. Take her into custody, I said. The bailiff stepped forward. This time, she didn't resist. As the cuffs closed again, she looked back. Not at me, at the gallery, at the veterans, at the officers, at the country she thought she owned. The door closed behind her, and power stayed outside. Jail doesn't care who your mother is. It doesn't respond to titles. It doesn't bend for legacy. In that cell, with concrete walls and borrowed time, Madison Chen met something new: equality. For the first time in her life, the law wasn't something she could speak over. It was something she had to live under. Jail has no ceremony, no speeches, no explanations, just a sound. The sound of a door closing that does not care who you were before it shut. Madison Chen learned that sound on her first night. Metal on metal, final, uninterested. It wasn't loud. That was the cruelty of it. They took her shoes, then her phone, then her name. What remained was a number and a narrow mattress that smelled like every regret before hers. The cell was smaller than her childhood closet. Concrete walls, a steel toilet without privacy, a light that never fully turned off, no windows, just time. First, she waited. That's what privilege does. It waits for someone important to notice, for a call, for an override, for a quiet correction. None came. The first night she didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of the bed, arms wrapped around herself, listening to sounds she had never needed to understand before. Someone crying 2 cells down. Someone laughing too loudly. Someone screaming at nothing. Reality doesn't whisper in jail. It introduces itself without manners. Resneb rides him in the morning, breakfast arrived. Cold eggs, dry bread. A plastic cup of something pretending to be coffee. She stared at it. This wasn't food. This was humility served without seasoning. Eat, a voice said from the neighboring cell. An older woman. Tired eyes. Tattooed history. First lesson, don't fight the routine. Madison didn't answer. She wasn't ready to speak to this world yet. By day 3, the silence had started talking back. In the absence of assistants, of handlers, of people who softened life's edges, thoughts arrived unfiltered. She replayed the words. Laws are for poor people. She had said it so easily, like quoting a fact. Now the sentence lived with her. On concrete, under fluorescent light. With nothing to protect it. On day 5, she cried. Not dramatically, quietly. The kind of crying that happens when no one is watching and there's no image left to preserve. Across the block, the older woman spoke again. You'll survive, she said. Jail doesn't break you. It just tells you who you are when nobody's impressed. Madison closed her eyes. She had spent her life being impressive. Day 7. She learned the rules, not written ones, the real ones. Don't stare, don't ask questions, don't pretend you're better, because jail can smell pretending. Someone recognized her. News travels fast in closed places. Hey, a younger inmate said, you that FBI girl? Madison stiffened. I saw the video, the woman continued. Thought you were untouchable. The word cut deeper than any insult. Untouchable. Past tense. I was wrong, Madison said quietly. The sentence surprised her. It came without defense, without explanation, just truth. Day 10. She was assigned cleaning duty, scrubbing floors that had absorbed years of stories no one tells. Her hands blistered. No one noticed. That was new, too. As she worked, she remembered saying, "Wars are for people who don't matter." She thought of the old veteran, the wheelchair, the silence in his eyes. For the first time, she didn't defend herself in memory. She listened. Night, she dreamed of sirens, not approaching, passing by, indifferent. Day 14. A letter arrived. 1 page, no letterhead, just handwriting, from her mother. "I will not interfere," it said. "What you are experiencing is accountability. I love you enough not to steal that lesson from you." Madison read it twice, then again, then folded it carefully like something fragile. That night, she didn't cry. She stared at the ceiling and realized something terrifying. No one was coming to save her. And for the first time, that might be exactly what she needed. Jail doesn't reform you with speeches. It reforms you with repetition, with sameness, with being ordinary for the first time in your life. By day 20, she stopped counting. Time had stopped being an enemy and started being a mirror. The older woman smiled at her one morning. "You're quieter," she said. Madison nodded. "I didn't know silence could teach," she replied. The woman chuckled, "Only if you listen." When the lights dimmed that night, Madison lay back on the thin mattress. She thought of the courtroom, the judge's voice, the sentence. For the first time, she understood it wasn't punishment. It was translation, the law, spoken in a language she could finally hear. And as the door remained closed, consequences kept speaking, not loudly but clearly. Freedom does not arrive with applause. It doesn't announce itself. It waits, quietly, until you're no longer sure you deserve it. Madison Chen woke before the lights that morning, not because she had somewhere to go, but because her body had learned how to exist without expectation. 30 days changes people who've never been alone with themselves. The guard stopped at her cell. "Pack up," he said. "You're done." Done. Such a small word for something so heavy. She folded her clothes slowly. There was no rush now. Jail teaches patience the hard way. She tucked the letter from her mother into her pocket, not for strength, for reminder. As she stepped into the hallway, the older woman looked up from her bench. "You'll be all right," she said. Madison hesitated. "I don't know who I am out there," she replied. The woman nodded. "That's the point." The door opened, not dramatically, no sunlight flooding in, just a click, a release. Outside, the air felt louder, sharper, too much. Freedom can be overwhelming when you're no longer armored by certainty. Car waited. Driver quiet. No conversation. Madison watched the city pass by. Same streets, different eyes. People walked freely, laughing, complaining, late for things. She had once believed the world moved for her. Now she saw it never had. Home, the silence was unfamiliar. Too clean, too open. No schedules, no counts, just space. She showered. Let the water run longer than necessary, as if trying to wash away not dirt, but belief. Later that afternoon, she sat at the kitchen table, across from her mother, the director. No titles here, just two people sharing the weight of what had happened. "You served your sentence?" her mother said. Madison nodded. "That doesn't mean it's over," she replied. Her mother looked at her carefully. "No," she said. "It means it's beginning." There was no lecture, no forgiveness ceremony, just honesty. "You embarrassed me," her mother said, "not because of my position, but because of what you believed." Madison didn't argue. "I know." You used power without earning it, her mother continued. You treated sacrifice like inconvenience. Madison's voice was steady now. I thought the system belonged to us. Her mother shook her head. The system belongs to everyone, and it only survives when people like us are willing to lose. That night, Madison couldn't sleep, not because of noise, but because of possibility. She opened her phone. Messages waited. Some angry, some supportive, most curious. She didn't respond, not yet. Words needed to mean something again. The next morning she walked. No driver, no destination, just movement. Rice Creekery, she passed a recruiting office, paused, looked at the names on the wall, people who had chosen service without expecting protection. She remembered saying, "Wars are for people who don't matter." The sentence felt foreign now, like something spoken by a stranger she no longer recognized. At a cafe, the barista didn't know her, didn't care. "Next," they said, and for the first time, that felt right. Freedom had returned, but it didn't feel like before. It felt earned, fragile, conditional. Madison Chen was no longer untouchable. She was accountable. And accountability does something strange. It makes every step heavier, but every choice clearer. Public reckoning doesn't arrive with shouting. It arrives with eyes, watching, waiting, measuring whether the change is real or just another performance. Madison Chen stood behind a podium 2 weeks after her release. No banners, no crowd control, just microphones and the weight of memory. The room was quiet in a way that felt earned. Veterans sat in the front rows, not angry, not welcoming, present. She looked older, not in years, in awareness. "My name is Madison Chen," she began. The words came slowly. "I'm not here to explain myself." A pause. "I'm here to own what I did." Cameras clicked, not aggressively, cautiously. "I said laws were for poor people," she continued. "I said things that stripped dignity from people who earned it." She swallowed. "I was wrong. Not misunderstood. Not misquoted. Wrong. I believed power protected me," she said. "I believed my family's position made me different." Her voice didn't break. That mattered. "It doesn't," she said, "and it shouldn't." A veteran shifted in his seat. 97-year-old Robert Santos. He hadn't planned to attend, but he was there. "I disrespected men and women who gave this country their youth, their health, their silence." She looked directly at them now. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." That sentence landed hardest. "I'm not asking for it," she said. "I'm asking for the chance to prove I've learned." Someone in the back scoffed. That was fair. Change doesn't get applause on credit. "I served my sentence," Madison said. "But accountability doesn't end there." She placed her hands flat on the podium. "I will never hold public office. I will never claim authority I didn't earn." She took a breath. "I will spend the rest of my life undoing the harm I caused." The room stayed silent, because forgiveness is not something you summon. It's something other people decide. After the conference, reporters asked their questions, some fair, some cruel. "Is this just damage control? Are you doing this for your mother?" "Why should anyone believe you?" Madison answered carefully. "You shouldn't," she said. "Not yet." Outside, the veterans gathered. She approached them, slow, respectful, no entitlement left in her posture. Robert Santos looked up at her. His voice was thin but steady. "You don't owe me an apology," he said. "You owe the country better behavior." She nodded. I know. I fought so people could choose what kind of citizen they wanted to be, he continued. You chose poorly. She didn't flinch. I did. He studied her. Long. Then said something unexpected. Choice doesn't end with mistakes. He turned away. Not forgiveness, but possibility. Madison walked home alone. No escorts, no protection, just the city. People stared. Some recognized her, some didn't. That was the truest consequence. Night, she wrote. Not statements, letters. To the officer she assaulted, to the veterans she insulted, to herself. Pretty forgiveness didn't come rushing in, and that was right. Because real change doesn't ask to be believed. It waits to be seen. And we move into the long road, where redemption is slow and memory does not forget. Justice does not arrive with thunder. It comes quietly, like footsteps echoing behind you when you already know you are being followed by your past. The courtroom did not erupt. No cheers, no gasps, only silence, the kind that weighs more than noise, because everyone understood this was no longer a case. It was a mirror. I looked at her then, not as a daughter, not as a name, not as a symbol, but as a person standing at the edge of everything she thought she owned. Her confidence was still there, but cracked, like glass pretending to be steel. She believed the law bent for bloodlines. That power trickled through families, the way poison slips into water. Quiet, invisible, deadly. But law is not inherited. It is carried and dropped when hands grow careless. Wars are for poor people. Those words did not fade. They sank. They sank into uniforms, into medals, into wheelchairs pushed by shaking hands. They sank into a courtroom filled with people who had bled for rules she believed were optional. Words are not harmless. They are witnesses, and they never forget who spoke them. Guilty. The word did not shout. It landed, like a door closing somewhere behind her, soft enough to sound merciful, final enough to mean forever. She expected exceptions, a quiet rescue, a back door opened by familiar power. But justice did not recognize her last name. It recognized her actions, and that was the moment she learned the difference. Prison strips you of fantasy first. No titles, no connections, no whispered influence behind closed doors, just numbers, schedules, rules that do not bend when you explain who you are. She learned quickly. Authority means nothing when you are no longer standing above someone else. For the first time in her life, she waited, and no one hurried for her. Irony works quietly. She folded uniforms beside a woman who once wore one with honor and lost it trying to protect blood. That woman did not lecture. She did not raise her voice. She simply said, "The badge isn't power. It's a promise. And when you break it, it breaks everything you touch." Those words stayed, because they had nowhere else to go. Humility does not arrive all at once. It leaks in, through exhaustion, through routine, through realizing no one is impressed anymore. She stopped demanding, then stopped explaining, then stopped believing she was owed. That is how change begins. Not with forgiveness, but with silence inside yourself where excuses used to live. When she stood before me again, there was no performance, no confidence, no armor. Only a voice that finally understood how loud arrogance sounds after it's gone. She did not ask for mercy. She asked to be accountable, and that told me more than any speech ever could. 3 years later, I saw her again. Not behind a desk, not behind a name, not behind protection. She was pushing a wheelchair, carefully, patiently. The same road, the same parade, different footsteps. She did not speak of power. She spoke of service, and this time, she listened. Here is what that case taught me. The law doesn't fail when criminals break it. It fails when the privileged believe they were never meant to follow it. Justice survives only when those closest to power are held closest to accountability. Because the moment someone believes rules are for other people, democracy begins to rot quietly from the inside. And the sirens at night? They don't remind me of crime. They remind me that the law must be louder than last names,